January 1939. Prague is locked in a bitter freeze. The mood in the city is as bleak as the weather. The Munich Agreement has already torn the country apart, and the shadow of occupation looms. On the frozen Vltava river near the Holeshovice port, children are ice skating. Two boys glide near the edge of the ice, where the frozen surface meets the dark, freezing water. They stop. Protruding from the solid ice are two human legs, clad in men's trousers and socks. It will take ice cutters 2 days to carefully chop the block of ice free and drag it to the morgue. When the ice finally melts, it reveals a man with his hands bound, his head wrapped in his own coat, and his skull shattered by 14 blows. His name was Josef Štěpán, and the people who put him there were the ones he trusted most. Welcome to Cold Block. Josef Štěpán was a 41-year-old master tailor living in Havelská Street, right in the historic center of Prague. He was a successful man, having reportedly amassed a small fortune of around 180,000 crowns in savings, a massive sum for the era. For 12 years, he lived with Marie, a woman 5 years his junior. They finally married in 1937, but the marriage was a hollow shell. Marie had an illegitimate teenage son from a previous affair with a doctor who had fled to America. A son Joseph refused to support. Joseph himself was known to have a wandering eye. But in the Štěpán household, infidelity wasn't just tolerated, it was weaponized. Directly across the street from the tailor's apartment was a carpentry workshop, owned by 31-year-old Alois Holub. Holub was a divorced father drowning in debt. His business was failing, and he was facing multiple executions on his property. He was also Marie Štěpánova's lover. The affair was an open secret in the neighborhood. They blew kisses to each other from their windows across Havelská Street. Holub even played matchmaker for Josef, setting the tailor up with a young female clerk so that Josef would be out of the house, leaving Marie and Holub alone. But Holub didn't just want Marie. He needed Josef's money. And Marie, fearing a divorce would leave her with nothing, agreed. They just needed a blunt instrument to do the dirty work. Enter Antonin Vlach, Holub's 25-year-old former brother-in-law. Vlach was a brushmaker with a weak will, a heavy drinking habit, and a rap sheet of 17 prior convictions. Holub promised him steady work and 5,000 crowns to help eliminate the tailor. The trio's initial plans were almost comically inept. First, they tried poison. Vlach procured a heavy dose of veronal, which they slipped into Joseph's beer. But the dose was too strong. Joseph simply vomited it up and recovered 2 days later. Next, they plotted to get Joseph drunk and stage a fatal car crash in a ravine. They abandoned the idea as too risky. Finally, they stopped overthinking it. They decided on brute force. Josef Štěpán walks across the street to Holub's workshop. He believes he is there to sign paperwork regarding a 10,000 crown loan he had generously extended to the carpenter. As Josef sits at the desk, leaning over the documents, Vlach steps up behind him. In his hands is a heavy iron carpenter's clamp, wrapped in a rag. Vlach brings the iron down on the back of Josef's skull. Joseph collapses to the floor, bleeding heavily, but he is not dead. He begins to scream and kick his boots against the floorboards. panic sets in. Holub rushes to the radio and cranks the volume to the maximum, letting cheerful broadcast music drown out the sounds of the tailor fighting for his life. 14 blows rain down on Josef's head. To stop the noise of his kicking, Holub pulls the boots off the dying man's feet. Within minutes, the wealthy tailor is dead on the floor of his wife's lover. The murder was brutal, but the disposal was a dark comedy of errors. Holub and Vlach tied the body with hemp rope, shoved it into a sack, and wrapped Josef's head in his own coat to stop the bleeding. They then stuffed the corpse into an old wooden wardrobe. Under the cover of darkness, they loaded the wardrobe onto a handcart. Their destination was the Vltava River in Holešovice, a grueling 4.5-kilometer walk through the streets of Prague. Halfway there, the absurd reality of their crime almost caught up with them. A police officer stopped the two sweating men pushing a massive wardrobe through the dark. But the officer didn't ask to look inside. He simply wrote them a 20-crown fine because their handcart didn't have a lantern. They paid the fine, continued to the river, and tipped the body over the embankment into the freezing water. They then pushed the empty wardrobe all the way back to the workshop, where Holub chopped it up and burned it in his stove to destroy the bloodstains. For nearly 2 months, they thought they had gotten away with it. Marie played the grieving wife, telling police her husband had run off with a mistress or gone to a clinic to treat a venereal disease. Meanwhile, she quietly withdrew 35,000 crowns from his accounts and handed it directly to Holub to save his business. But on January 9th, the ice gave up its secret. Once the body was identified, the police didn't have to look far. The neighborhood gossip led them straight to Holub and Marie. When arrested, the trio immediately turned on each other. Vlach, the petty thief, broke first, confessing to the plot, but claiming Holub delivered the fatal blows. Holub fell to his knees in the courtroom, swearing on his child's life that Vlach acted alone while he was in the other room on the telephone. Marie, described by reporters as a woman devil, sat proudly in the courtroom with her legs crossed, denying everything. She claimed she had begged them not to do it, but Vlach looked her in the eye on the stand and testified to her final instructions to Holub. Alois, be careful. Let Antonin do it. He'll get out of it on his own. The jury saw through the web of lies. In March 1939, just as the Nazis were marching into Prague to establish the Protectorate, the court handed down its sentences. Antonin Vlach, the hired muscle who swung the iron, was sentenced to 15 years in heavy prison. Marie Stepanova, the wife who priced her husband's life at 35,000 crowns, received 25 years. And Alois Holub, the carpenter who orchestrated the slaughter of his benefactor, was sentenced to 30 years behind bars. The murder in Havelská Street captivated the public, not just for its brutality, but for what it represented. Writing in the independent weekly Przytomność, journalists viewed the crime as a symptom of a dying era. The post-Munich period was a time of profound moral decay and uncertainty. States were collapsing, borders were shifting, and people were losing faith in the future. As the article noted, everything was in uncertainty. Only 2 things remained: property and love. It is certain that people with twisted characters, selfish people without feeling and without moral obligations, are increasing. Josef Štěpán was a victim of a heavy iron clamp. But he was also a victim of a desperate, cynical time, murdered by people who believed that if the world was ending anyway, they might as well take what they wanted. Otýlie Vranska's body traveled the rails of Czechoslovakia long after she stopped breathing, split between 2 suitcases and 2 cities, her killer never brought to true justice even 90 years later. But she was far from the only person to vanish into the machinery of the era's transportation network, and not every case would leave a trail investigators could follow. Next time on Cold Block, we step off the platform and onto a different kind of journey, one where the victim didn't leave in pieces. They simply never arrived at all. If you made it this far, you already know what this channel is about. Like the video, subscribe to Cold Block, and stay with us. There's always another door.